Every story starts somewhere, and you are about to see how I started my journey in literacy. My love of reading really started with my grandmothers. They were both voracious readers. That's probably not even an adequate description. They loved books so much. My Grammy, who's on the left in the white gown, she was a lifelong learner and she loved to teach me the things that she felt were important. She would take me to the library and we would check out books, and then she would read them to me. And when we were done, she would ask me how I felt the story should have gone. And then she would recreate the story with my suggestions. And I just remember feeling like her house was full of words and wonder, and it really inspired me to want to learn to read so that I could in turn read to her. um, my grandmother, who is on the right, she was a big stickler for diction and vocabulary. Now, I didn't realize at the time that it was because she was losing her hearing, but I also had a very pronounced lisp, and she was dead set on fixing it. So we would sit with the dictionary and practice words in which I struggled to pronounce. And then she would define them for me. And it was one of my earliest connections with the fact that if you ever had a question, the answer was probably within the pages of a book somewhere. We just had to seek them out. She was also a big proponent of the arts, and she took me to the theater all the time. But she would always read me the play before we went so that I understood the context of what was happening up on the stage. That sparked a deal that we made when I was probably about six, that I would never go and see a show or a movie without first having read the book, because the book is just so much better. And at 38, I have never once broken that deal with her, and I don't think that I ever will. Maurice Sendak is one of my favorite early childhood writers. Outside Over There has a special place in my heart. Ida is the little girl in the story. Her dad goes away to sea, and her mom is very sad. And Ida has to be very brave to go and rescue her sister from a very sticky situation. My dad brought me this book right before he deployed, right after my little brother had been born. And he brought it to remind me to be brave while he was gone. And when I missed him the most, I could pull this book off my shelf and I could hear his voice reading it to me. Even though I wasn't yet quite adept at reading the words on my own, I knew what the intent of the story was. And even though my dad was thousands of miles away from us for a long time, I felt like he was still right there with me, and he helped me to remember to be brave. Stuart Little by E.B. White is about a little mouse who thinks he's people, who gets separated from his family and has to go on many adventures in order to find his way back to them. This book is a triumph for me. This is the last book I remember my mom ever attempting to read to me. She just wasn't a reader and it wasn't something she enjoyed. So I read the rest of the book on my own. And the reason it was such a triumph was I had just started my second year in first grade, having been kept back because I refused to learn how to read by my teacher, Mrs. Clapp. And I remember being so proud of the fact that I had proven her wrong and that I wasn't the idiot that she was convinced that I was. And despite the fact that it is a triumph for me, I have never read the book again because it still reminds me of the fact that that was the last time my mom ever read to me. And that fact makes me just a little bit sad. Roald Dahl was amazing because he didn't sugarcoat brutal situations just because he was writing for kids. But the twits, I wish he had sugarcoated that one. This book left me feeling horrified that there were people out there who could be bad just because they enjoyed being bad. The ending of this book left me feeling so upset that I had to hide it. And I chose to hide it in the freezer between a bag of peas and a TV dinner. My family still jokes around about Freezer Siberia to this day, and I still hide books when they upset me. I just choose a better hiding spot now. Um, we keep a copy of the Twits in my house because the kids enjoy it, but they all know that they have to tuck that one in, spine facing in, so that I don't trigger myself when I see it because I still get the willies when I see this book. While I was growing up, I spent a lot of time inside the library because that's where the books were. And this is a picture of the Escondido Public Library in California. The reason this particular library was so important to me growing up was that this was the library where the librarian convinced my mom to sign the back of my library card, which gave me permission to go into the adult section without an adult present. I remember, and actually, so does my mom, that the first book that I ever checked out with my adult library card was The Sands of Time by Sidney Sheldon, which is beyond inappropriate subject matter for a 9-year old to be reading. Um, the lesson I learned that day was that it was very freeing to go in the adult section of the library, but I was probably better off asking for book recommendations so that I wasn't exposed to content that I wasn't emotionally mature enough to handle. I remember discovering Diana Wynne Jones in her book Howl's Moving Castle when I was about 8 years old. And this is a book that I have just continually chosen off of library shelves until I finally realized I had to own my own copy so that I could read it at will rather than wait around for the library to get their copy back in. It's about Sophie, an apprentice hat maker who feels like she can't be anything other than what people tell her she can be. And she ends up going on this epic adventure to find out who she actually is and has to learn how to see herself for, well, in a way that other people learn to see her through her actions. This was really important to me in my teen years because really struggled to know who I was and how I fit in with my family and with my friends. And Sophie is always the character that comes to mind when I start to stand in my own way. And I learned a lot from her journey. Being the book nerd that I am, I have a small stack of books that lives on my nightstand, and I never reshelve them because I pick them up and reread them a lot. 1984 by George Orwell is one of those books. Um, the book is about George Orwell's vision of what the future could possibly be. The government is so invasive that they go so far as to edit the dictionary to take out words that they deemed irrelevant. And I just remember feeling upset that these people in the books were accepting these changes and this dumbing down of their society without ever wondering why the government wanted them so ignorant. And it is because of this book, I read it in my ninth grade year, I believe, that I got really interested in politics and started to question the values that my family kind of espoused and really started developing my own outlook. Douglas Adams' book, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, it's one of those books where you pick it up believing it's going to be one thing, and in fact, it's entirely another. Arthur Dent is the main character, and he lives an entirely ordinary existence until he somehow manages to get sucked up into this epic journey when all he really wants is a nice cup of tea. I grabbed this book off my English teacher's shelf in the 10th grade on a dare. He challenged the class to read a book outside their typical genre. And his challenge and this book are what really propelled me to rethink how I qualified what made a good book. And I really started to reevaluate how I chose my reading material. And in doing so, I have lived 100 more lives that I otherwise would have ignored because the genre or the type of book just wasn't my thing. and I'm so grateful for that experience. Being a mother, I have come to realize that families speak a secret language, and my family speaks fluent Harry Potter. This is the first series that all seven of us read from cover to cover, all seven books. And we all enjoyed them, but for different reasons. And it's been something that we have continued to enjoy, and we still spend a lot of time making Potter references and discussing how the books are different than the movies and talking about the lessons that are tucked within their pages and daydreaming about what our favorite characters would be up to now as if they truly lived outside of their pages. I am so grateful for the unity that this series brought our family, and I will never not have a full and complete set sitting on our bookshelves. My last experience for this assignment doesn't center on just one book, but rather on my youngest daughter, Torin. Torin is a secret keeper. She has always loved books and she adores being read to, but she has been able to read on her own since she was 4, but she was not going to let either her father or myself know about her reading skills. Torrin has made the connection that books are something you read only at school in connection with receiving a grade. And she fights reading at home with a ferocity that just unsettles me because I love books so much and I want her to love them too. Um, Over the summer, we tried to address the issue, and I devised a challenge where she set a goal for herself of a number of books that she wanted to read. And the only parameters were that she could absolutely stop reading a book if it didn't interest her. And that if she found a book that she loved, then she would come and tell me about it so that I could read it and we could talk about it together. Torn ended up reading more than 60 books, and she was very proud of herself. And so was I, frankly. Reading is still not in her top 5 favorite things to do, but when I catch her reading when she thinks that I'm not looking, I have hope that eventually one day she is going to find that book that sparks her love of reading just like I did. And that is that is a hope that I carry with me and hope to nurture as we go through the rest of her journey together. So that's the story of how I became the reader that I am today. I hope that if you have not read some of the books that you saw today in my presentation, that you seek them out and that you enjoy them. And if you have read them, I hope you read them again because they're worth it.